BC Premier David Eby meeting with the Federal Energy Minister Tim Hodgson at this hour. There's a lot riding on that meeting, so joining me right now to talk about it is Adrian Dix. He's BC's Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions. Welcome back to Power Play.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike.
So Minister Hodgson did mention yesterday he would be meeting with you yesterday as well. So I wanted to ask you, following that meeting, do you feel any differently about this MOU and about the project?
Well, the meeting gave us an opportunity, and Mr. Hodgson came to British Columbia and he met with me in my hometown. So all respect for that. And it gave me the opportunity to communicate our strong view on this question. But, you know, I'd say to your audience, having listened to the previous interview, that the MOU exists in time and space. People can read it, read what it says very clearly, are the obligations taken on by both governments. The most important one for us on a project that, as the Premier said, as I came on, no proponent, no route, no money, and there's not a possibility at this fairly outlandish price that would be required that you'd have the kind of take-or-pay contracts that would be provided by people who would want to use the pipeline. No possibility of that. It would require a massive public subsidy. So in effect, one of the most important provisions of this agreement from our perspective is the one that says it won't be publicly subsidized, although whether that will be maintained throughout is open to question, and whether there'll be a public subsidy around the Pathways project is open to question. But what that tells you is we're spending a lot of time here and a lot of energy and massive changes to policies that don't just affect Alberta, but it affect British Columbia and all the other provinces for a project that doesn't exist. We in BC, we got projects that exist, and we've got many of them. The North Coast Transmission Line, which is our project, which is a major national project, will open up $50 billion worth of mining projects. We've had 300 meetings with First Nations on that project, 300. And we are moving ahead. We're going to have shovels in the ground next year. That's a real project. And in this case, frankly, the First Nations most affected, the coastal First Nations, but many others are, found out about it in a leaked article in the Globe and Mail. So I don't think that's the best way to do business, in my view. In any event, this is a project that isn't going ahead, but the fact of the project and the changes has an impact. It has an impact on all the social license required to do the tens of billions of dollars in projects we are doing, one. And two, it's significantly distracting. I've done more interviews this week, probably with CTV, than on all of the major projects that are actual projects that we're doing in British Columbia.
And we do appreciate you coming on, but I wanted to address a couple of things you said in there. First of all, about Premier Eby's comments saying no proponent, no route, no money, no First Nations support. So I guess why are you so worried about it if you say that there's all of these reasons why it shouldn't happen? Why are you so concerned that it will happen then?
Well, 3 points. One, what we're talking about is lifting a tanker ban on the coast, which is important for the development of projects like LNG Canada 2, like Silicim's LNG, like dozens of mining projects.
With respect, Minister, with respect, Minister, according to the MOU, that only happens after a number of other hurdles have been passed and a number of other things have been put in place, even a proponent. So, you know, that tanker ban on the Northwest Coast, that is the last step.
But Mike, there is a commitment, an undertaking by the federal government with respect to these issues. And you just discussed that in your previous interview. There are undertakings to make a series of decisions that are economic and public policy matters. Clean energy regulations, for example. Well, we meet the Clean Energy Act because we made investments to meet the Clean Energy Act. And now our neighbor is getting an exemption from that. And this was not talked to us about. But I would say, just broadly speaking, the tanker ban is important to us. It's a significant issue for coastal First Nations. And if you don't think they think it's important, you haven't talked to coastal First Nations, because they've made their position very clear. And we have done extraordinary things on the coast with real projects like LNG Canada 1, the largest private sector investment in Canada, benefits Alberta as well as British Columbia. LNG Canada 2 will equal that. But projects in the port, our clean electricity plan, billions of dollars of clean electricity projects across our province. These all require work with First Nations and with others to make sure that they go ahead. So this is significant for us for that reason. But as I noted to you, all of the provisions in this MOU and the specific undertakings of the federal government that will occur in the next 6 months took place, many of which affect British Columbia directly. We weren't involved in, and that's not, there's a tendency to think, well, that's after the fact complaining. Can you imagine what would happen if Premier Eby and Premier Canoe and the Prime Minister and Premier Ford sat down and discussed about something in Edmonton and Calgary without the Alberta government's presence? What do you think their reaction would be, Mike?
I take your point. I wanted to ask you specifically about the tanker ban, but more specifically about the route. And the reason I say that is because there's already a Trans Mountain pipeline. So what if a proponent came along and decided that they wanted the pipeline, instead of going to the northwest coast, instead to go to Burnaby? Would BC be open to that?
Well, Mike, here's the distinction, right? There is, most pipeline expansion projects now are what are called optimization projects. They get more oil through an existing pipeline. And there is just such a proposal on Trans Mountain, which would cost a fraction of the cost of this, on a pipeline which is currently owned by the government of Canada, that, by the way, they can't sell because it's not worth what it costs to build it, by about $18 billion. So there are cheaper alternatives. You are absolutely correct. There are dramatically cheaper alternatives here. And the federal government and the Alberta government have rejected those alternatives, and they're going for a northern route. I didn't create the northern route here. This is their proposal, right? And so I can only comment on their suggestions. And right now, their proposal is essentially a press release, but their proposal is to take a northern route across northern British Columbia.
And I understand that that was their proposal, but that route is not set in stone, and I don't think the MOU, and I know, as a matter of fact, the MOU does not spell out a route. So that's why I'm asking. With what we're expecting, the increased capacity possibly to be in that other pipeline, if this next pipeline, a new pipeline, was to go to Burnaby, would you be completely against that?
But Mike, what we've said is, there is a pipeline. We just built one. It just finished. We just paid $34 billion. You paid for it. I paid for it. Everyone listening to us paid for it, right? We built this pipeline. It's currently not full. It's about 82 to 85% full, depending on the month. In addition to that, you could add hundreds of thousands of barrels per day without building a new pipeline. And there's about $1.1 billion in barrels per day available in what I call optimization projects that are a fraction of the cost of this. The fact is, we in BC, and this is where we want the focus to be, and this was my message to Minister Hodgson last night, we have real projects here. So I know a lot of time gets spent on this, and they've been focused on this, and they've made this massive change in their approach to things to get an MOU, not a project, but an MOU. But what we expect is focus on the North Coast Transmission Line, on mines in BC, on projects like LNG Canada too, so we get those across the line. Because unlike this project, those projects are going to make Canadians wealthier, support healthcare, support education, and support jobs into the future. That's the difference between what we're doing and what this is.
Okay, Minister, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I do appreciate you taking the time today, though. Adrian Dix, BC's Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be on the show.